Mr. Chair. I would like to thank Schiller Institution for the invitation to attend this important conference. Also, I thank Madame Helga for her excellent keynote speech. 2020 is a very special and challenging year. The trade war, the eruption and the spread of coronavirus, the riots in the US, the world economic recession, and the escalated geopolitical tensions. I just name a few major ones. Global growth is projected by the IMF at negative 4.9% this year. So in the following discussion, some of my observations and comments are kind of sourced in research and of academic by nature. So I will speak in my personal capacity only. Global challenge should be handled globally with a multilateral approach. No country will be safe until every country is safe. When we start to discuss the multilateral approach in dealing with the pandemic and the global crisis, I recognize that there is a debate on the value of multilateralism and the multilateral institution. Some people are talking about economic decoupling, a Cold War, and even a conflict of civilizations. Since I'm from China, I ask myself, is there any fundamental conflict between civilizations in the East and West? Chinese civilization is unique in many aspects, but is not fundamentally different from Western civilization. One example, in the 6th century BC, China had Taiji, or yin-yang concept, which is the evolution of two opposite forces. I found in surprise that this was also a core concept in physiological theory in Greek medicine in the same period of time. Another example, a core concept of Confucianism is the middle course approach that also corresponds to the doctrine of the mean that was explored extensively by Hippocrates, Plato, and Aristotle in ancient Greece. In 16th century, the brilliant Jesuit missionary Matteo Ricci recognized the striking parallels in Confucius and Mencius to the Christian concept of man in the images of the God, and devoted his life to building an ecumenical alliance between China and the West. During the evolution of trade tension between the United States and China, some opinions in the media have demonized China as an evil trade partner that are systematically engaged in illegal subsidizing, cheating, and stealing. That reminds me of the overwhelming public opinion in the media against the Jewish people in some parts of Europe before World War II. The truth is that after more than 40 years market-oriented reform and opening up, China has already been transformed into a market-based economy. In fact, the share of fiscal resources in GDP mobilized by some European governments is higher than that in China due to extensive social welfare arrangement. But nobody in Europe complains that this welfare has distorted the market. China has a profound tradition of market economy, both in theory and practice. In the 6th century BC, Lao Tzu, a famous philosopher and the founder of Taoism, advised his government to rule without intervention, which is an ancient version of Invisible Hand of Adam Smith. Another famous economist and philosopher, Guanzi, in the 7th century BC, suggested that in the years of economic depression, government could increase expenditure to implement seemingly wasteful projects for the purpose of creating employment. That is the ancient Chinese version of Keynesian economics. Financially, China was also highly developed. As early as in 11th century, China introduced the first official paper currency in the world. On the issue of economic and technology decoupling, the attempt to block a major people and civilization from competing fairly with other countries and getting access to new scientific and technological knowledge is morally wrong and will help China to win sympathy around the world. On the other hand, China has the largest pool of educated labor force, including a largest pool of engineers now. That will enable the country to be more innovative, professional, practical, and rational. Compared with other multi-country free trade zones, China has already become the largest single-country retail market by itself. It is more than equivalent to a free trade zone with a highly integrated infrastructure network, centralized fiscal and monetary policy, and deep and liquid labor and capital market. The authorities have also determined to further open its economy, greatly enhance intellectual property protection, and implement structural reforms, including introducing competitive neutrality for state-owned enterprises. In the end, it is the effectiveness and the efficiency of China's domestic resource allocation that will determine China's international competitiveness. I'm not specialized in geopolitics, but I learned that the scenario of decoupling and the new Cold War is based on an old strategy called divide and conquer, or offshore balance. It is very smart from the offshore player's perspective, but it will benefit the offshore manipulator at the expense of onshore neighbors. I wonder whether those equally smart onshore players are willing to buy this, and how high a price the offshore player wants to pay to convince so many countries to engage a long-term conflict with their major trade partner. It is not objective to exaggerate China's conflict with India at the border. It is important to recognize that the current border is largely a stable equilibrium. The common interest of these two ancient civilizations is to cooperate and develop their economies and achieve joint historical revival. The two countries should benefit from their common cultural heritage, based on centuries of peaceful and friendly cultural exchanges, particularly the exchanges in the form of Buddhism. The history issue between China and Japan often looks like a deadlock, but a forward-looking approach is the key. China has largely recovered its self-confidence, and it is very clear that China's revival does not mean revenge. When new generations from China visit Japan as tourists, most of them feel they like Japan. Japan is China's only neighboring country that has maintained a lot of Chinese characters in their written language, and they use chopsticks, eat rice, use soy sauce, and practice calligraphy. All of these are the typical reflections of East Asian culture. A healthy and stable Sino-Russian relationship can be much more sustainable than many people's imagination. Their stable cooperative relationship can be attributed to many factors. It is not a coincidence that their combined territory maps the Mongolian Empire in history. Toward the end of last century, China and Russian leaders reached a wise and visionary agreement to delimit and confirm their common border. Their mutual respect and support to core interests of each other can go a long way. The biggest loss the United States could incur from a decoupling and the new Cold War is that many of the 1.4 billion Chinese people who are otherwise very friendly towards America could turn into opponents. By contrast, a friendly and cooperative China will be definitely the Americans' greatest fortune in Asia. I believe a constructive competition and cooperation between China, the United States, and other countries under a rules-based multilateral system should be the right choice. Fortunately, the IMF is still functioning normally and has played a constructive leading role, which is also supported by the World Bank and other multilateral banks. The Bretton Woods institution could do two more things, in my view. First, a general allocation of SDR that will increase the supply of international reserve assets, reduce the burden of any single country to supply its reserve currency excessively, and provide low-income countries necessary resources to alleviate their debt distress. Second, the multinational development banks should greatly expand its lending to include not only developing countries, but also developed countries, including the United States itself, that will fully utilize the low interest rate environment and greatly stimulate global demand and pull up growth in receiving countries. So in conclusion, I wish the after COVID-19 world a more cooperative and peaceful one. Thank you.
Thank you very much.